Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto creates Chidori, part 1. Subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. Uzumaki screamed a heavily alien-looking Sasuke. His skin was gray, with two mutated hand-like wings protruding from his back. His nose was more of a blackened smudge, and his yellow eyes glistened an animalistic yellow. In his hand was black, chirping a thriving mass of lightning. It was known as the Kuro Chidori or Black 1000 Birds or even the Wailing Chidori. Sasuke screamed Uzumaki. His bright orange jumpsuit was covered in cuts, stains, soaked in sweat, and furthermore he was encased in a bright crimson and bubbling cloak of chakra. In his hand a purple-looking orb of chakra was stabilized and rotating in many different ways. Chidori, Rasengan, the two techniques clashed. In that instance two shields of chakra billowed into existence. One blue and the other red as the two Arank collided. The chakra began to mix and become a vivid purple, and it began to arch out, over, and around them in purple tails which rapidly twisted, turned, twitched, convulsed, and coalesced into a massive purple orb of solid chakra. Deep in the middle of it a Jinchuriki empowered Uzumaki, and a curse level 2 marked Sasuke growled and snarled as they heaved there against one another. Suddenly Uzumaki gave out, he had a direct beat on Sasuke's chest. He had been ordered to bring Sasuke back, and that typically meant alive. Sasuke had no restraints. Sasuke's lightning-covered fist caught Uzumaki in the stomach. Uzumaki stopped his attack before he snarled and launched a Yakai claw which shredded the forehead protector. The orb of chakra expanded and turned black and began to expand. It drilled into the waterfall and the cliff face behind it. As it touched the water it began to cause violent waves and the water from the waterfall cascaded around it. The heat emitted from the chakra orbs caused storm clouds to gather. Suddenly water began to flow upwards and down the waterfall defying gravity as thunder boomed and lightning crackled. Deep in the center of the orb a purple light appeared only to be replaced by a white one. Cracks appeared in the black orb illuminated by the white light and suddenly the chakra orb exploded. Sasuke was on the ground not breathing or moving. Sasuke looked at his friend's corpse, tears welling in his eyes. Sasuke dropped his forehead protector and scrambled out of the valley and away. Kakashi forced more chakra into muscles and his already ground-eating stride increased. God, the strain was incredible. Kakashi kicked himself. He needed to get back into shape. He looked up and he saw the black clouds, his heart sank. He could feel the chakra building. He forced more chakra into his legs and he was almost at the speed he used when he was in Anbu. Please don't let me be too late. I am sorry Uzumaki. So sorry. I was given Sasuke to prevent him from leaving. Man, I fucked this up. The Cyclopean shinobi thought, and eventually he cleared the forest to find the landscape had changed. Pakin and Kakashi landed together. Pakin sniffed. He's gone, Kakashi. Sense says not too far. You have a choice though, Uzumaki are the one who did this. Kakashi said nothing, but made his way over to his other male student. With tenderness and care that came from looking after Uzumaki from his days in the Anbu. He carried Uzumaki up the cliff and was soon enough rushing back towards Konoha. Kakashi sighed, he hated using this technique, but to save his student Kamen Kai. The mental gate opened and Kakashi began to sprint. He had failed Uzumaki twice and he wasn't going to make it a third time. Tsunade sighed. She had just managed to stabilize one Hyuga. He had arrived with a wound that punched straight through the young genin's chest, just clipping his lung. If it wasn't for the fact that Tsunade had been reaching into the Anbu Medical Corps and Medical Corps for combat medics to retrieve the genin or the corpses. Furthermore she had sent Chunin and Jonin all over the village to find Kakashi Haddock. Tsunade-sama, one Akimichi Hanzo is here. Tsunade pulled off her medical scrub hat and turned to the Akimichi. Have you found Kakashi yet? Hanzo possessed the frame of an Akimichi, but none of the fat. However he was able to manipulate the earth to create his own version of the Akimichi hidden jutsu. No Tsunade-sama, we've checked everywhere. We even checked the red light district. We have no idea where he is. Tsunade sighed, she couldn't be annoyed at the bad news. She did send Hanzo and his team, Chunin Team 21, to scour the village for the Cyclopean Jonin. You're dismissed, send me Saratobi Asuma and Yuhi Kurenai. The two Jonin appeared as Tsunade pulled on her green Haori report. Where is Haddock Kakashi? Mission successful. The two Jonin said. Tsunade nodded, and your comrade? Asuma paused, his hand going for a cigarette before stopping. You sent Nara Shikamaru after Uchiha Sasuke, correct? I overheard your mission briefing of him. Tsunade stopped Kakashi and must have gone after his two pupils, to take him over hot coals when he came back. Tsunade-sama. Massive chakra surge and movement. Chunin said, collapsing into the room. He wasn't one that Tsunade was familiar with. Who are you? Hinachi, barrier core. Tsunade and nodded chakra this way at high speed. Kakashi and him. Tsunade's eyes hardened. When you say him you mean Uzumaki. I'm not a fan of what he contains, alright, and I don't like him much either. I can tell between warden and jailer. Thank you very much, Tsunade-sama. Then why the dislike of him? Asked Asuma. He nearly compromised the detection barriers back when he was 8 or so. I like the fact he showed us we had weaknesses. The Anbu loved him for it. But we hate him for the manner in which he does it and the fact that none of us can catch him. Tsunade nodded. How many people are like this? The barrier nin shrugged quite a lot. But since the invasion, and we saw Uzumaki running all over the place, our view on him changed. He's a comrade. We won't drink with him soon, but we don't hate him. Kakashi skidded to a stop as he shut the first of the 8 inner gates. Kakashi. Where were you? What happened? We'll cover the sign in. The words were blurred and out of focus. He was exhausted, he was embarrassed. This was more proof that he needed to get back into shape. He managed to move with surprising grace and uninterrupted. Maybe that was because of the Anbu or he didn't remember summoning them, but he slowly but surely made his way to the hospital. We won't heal, stated a medic who happened to be free. The medic screamed as one of the Anbu grabbed him and vanished in a pillar of smoke. Someone gets Tsunade-sama, tells her that Hada Kakashi and Uzumaki are back. Growled Bear. The Anbu were given an animal mask based on their personalities and skills. Bear, for instance, was built like an outside privy or brick outhouse. His skill with Doten and rock-hard muscles made him exceptionally hard to move. He was also very slow in Taijutsu, very easy to evade, but if he caught you, well, there was saying holes big enough for Akimichi suited him aptly. He also possessed a technique called the Karetsu no Jutsu or crab hand technique. It was a simple technique that allowed the user to grab a weapon and hold it effectively to be used in combat. However, this technique was learned by a shinobi who would become known as Connie or Crab. Crab got his name by learning and abusing this technique to the point where he could grab a tree branch and use it as either a staff, club, spear or even a tree. More than one person had called give him he's good with. Crab gained notoriety when he had grabbed a stool the Sandaime Hokage was going to sit on and used to decorate Iwanin's face. Unfortunately, nothing could be gathered from the shinobi after such an effective technique. Bear turned to Crab, who nodded and vanished over to the Hokage tower. However, he shouldn't have gone, as Tsunade appeared out of hospital ward with Sarutobi Asuma and Yuhi Kurenai. Hada Kakashi, where have you been? Growled the busty Hokage. Retrieving and trying to retrieve both of my students, although the one I trained was undeserving. That's another cross for me to bear. Kakashi mumbled, placing Uzumaki onto a bed. Tsunade and Shizune wheeled him into surgery and began to set to work, although not much was needed. The internal bleeding and fractures from taking and delivering chakra-enhanced blows had majorly healed up, and the entry and exit wounds were still healing, and there was the blood loss as well. After 3 hours of surgery, nothing too taxing but just arduous and laborious, Uzumaki had been wheeled out and put in his own room. Uzumaki and Mindscape. The sound of water woke Uzumaki. The blonde found himself in a discolored and flooding sewer. Uzumaki found himself on his back. Gingerly Uzumaki sat up. He willed himself not to yelp at the freezing water. He got up and he found himself in front of a pair of massive iron gates with a label in the middle. So the worthlessness has appeared. A deep rumbling bass voice rumbled. Uzumaki looked up and found himself looking into deep red eyes. The eyes on their own made Uzumaki pale and almost shit himself. Kyuubi. He panted. The red eyes slowly revealed a maw full of teeth and was suddenly coated in red chakra. Before Uzumaki could react, the chakra wrapped around Uzumaki and, like a human grabbing a dog by the scruff of its neck, effortlessly hoisted Uzumaki up. Pathetic, that is what you are. Uzumaki gulped. What do you want? He gasped as the chakra encompassed him. Freedom removes the seal. Set me free. Rumbled the Kyuubi. Uzumaki shook his head. What if I gave you power? Power to bring your friend back? Power to get that even more pathetic pink-haired monstrosity? Yes, I know about her, every thought, feeling, success and failure and more, I feel. I know you, and you make me sick. Uzumaki snarled and the red chakra suddenly ripped itself from him and reappeared. You're in my body and you parent. Impressive. Marginally the fox growled and let Uzumaki go. Aside from the fact that you're weaker than Shukaku's container is embarrassing, I will not allow that. But I can't and I won't let you out. Don't forget that the village hates me. Kyuubi chuckled, I know. Thanks to them, they have made me pretty powerful. You're stuck here until I choose to release you. What would you do if I gave you my chakra? Do not lie. Get stronger, protect my true few allies, and bring Sasuke back, declared Uzumaki. Path began the Kyuubi in a body bag. Him, Orochimaru, and Kabuto as well. Okay, why? If you didn't notice, the last Uchiha drove his chidori into my chest twice. So Sasuke dies for that. Orochimaru dies because he killed one of the few people who gave shit about me at least. I hope he did. As for Kabuto, he dies simply because. Two righteous murders and one senseless. Maybe you won't be so pathetic after all. I'll give you 3 of my tales of chakra. Learn to use them. I'll be watching. Uzumaki bolted upright. As he sat up he noticed that Shikamaru was in the room along with Kiba, Akamaru, and Sakura. What's going on? Where's Sasuke? Did you bring him back? Demanded Sakura. Uzumaki's eyes hardened and he struggled to pull off his hospital gown. He grabbed the drip bag and pulled himself out of bed, revealing 2 monster scars. These are the courtesy of your precious Uchiha, Sakura. Uzumaki growled as he increased his killing intent. Sakura's eyes glassed over, she burst into tears and fled from the room. That's going to bite me in the ass. Uzumaki is troublesome, but can you put some clothes on? Uzumaki blushed and pulled on his gown again. Uzumaki did so and Shikamaru pulled out a pen and paper. I need to know precisely about what occurred after the squad disintegrated to fight Orochimaru's Sound Ninja 4. Uzumaki sighed. There was a 5th. You saw him. Silver hair, 2 red dots on his forehead, and piercing green and bloodshot eyes. Called himself Kagaya Kimimaro. He possessed a bloodline that allowed him to manipulate his bones. He snatched a container with Sasuke in it and vanished. I got to a clearing, he had set the container down and Sasuke had just appeared from it and ran off. He blocked me, we fought. He kept mowing my clones down before I could do anything and then Lee caught up with me. Lee managed to hold off Kimimaro so I could chase after Sasuke. Shikamaru nodded. That corroborates what Lee told me. Now what happened after? Uzumaki sighed and told him everything. Uzumaki explained Sasuke let him beat the crap out of him before they began to fight in earnest and that it climaxed with Sasuke running him through with a chidori whilst blocking the second one with a Rasengan. Shikamaru nodded and Kiba left us. Kiba looked at the two. Why? You're not privy to S-rank secrets. I'm not, but I have suspicions and thus I need to go into further detail. Kiba slouched off. Shikamaru turned back to Uzumaki. You left out going into Biju mode didn't you? Uzumaki nodded. Sasuke snapped my neck when he pillagered me into the river. The cloak brought me back. It brought me back after he ran me through with the chidori. We fought some more, I don't remember it. I remember when Sasuke used his Kuro chidori and I clashed it with my Vermilion Rasengan. Shikamaru chuckled at the name. Sounds more apt. I'd prefer putting that in my report rather than Kyuubi Rasengan. Shikamaru nodded. We've been pulled in front of a court-martial. Anything I need to be worried about? Expect heavy bias, informalities, and manipulation of facts. No one likes me because of Vendus. Vendus, indeed. When a mission from D to C is issued, it is often issued by the Hokage in front of the mission chunin on the desk. B ranks are often issued by the Honorable Elders and the Hokage. A ranks are much the same except occasionally Danzo is involved and, as for S ranks, they are solely between the participants and the cage. The elders are only told that an S rank has been issued and are told it in the briefest number of words. However, debriefing for anything other than B to S rank missions are given in paper form and a short summary is given to the cage to stamp. For the aforementioned ranks, either the entire Shinobi Council is present or the Council of War consisting of Cage, Elders, Anbu Commander, and Jonin Commander are present. Also debriefing was done in the council chamber. Uzumaki was escorted there by a squad of Anbu. He felt numb, cold. He didn't feel the suppressing chakra cuffs placed on him, the sun's warm rays. All he felt was cold. He twitched when someone almost hit him where he had been struck by the chidori. He smiled as the Anbu casually backhanded the civilian away. Worried about the court-martial? Asked one of the Anbu. Relatively, I know I did nothing wrong. But it's the fact that no offense, but Konoha has a raging hard-on for Uchiha has and I'm the scapegoat. Uzumaki deadpanned. It does look that way. Have faith. Said another of the Anbu. I do have faith that I'm going to be fucked royally. Let's get the loop done because by God this is going to be fucking hard to swallow. By now the group made it to the council chambers. Leaning against a building and surrounding him, all in various states of recovery were the retrieval team, a few of the team's comrades, and surprisingly the Sand siblings. Surprisingly Tenten was there. She took one look at Uzumaki. You, looks like you've escaped death. Uzumaki chuckled, winced before spitting out some blood. Well, one tends to look like that when they walk off to A rank. Oh, and it is classed as assassination class, and the element is Raten. Tenten's eyes widened and she hugged the slightly shorter blonde. The retrieval team winced, Shikamaru more so because he had to write up Uzumaki's account as the blonde was not allowed to do anything so strenuous. Will you be alright? Gaara asked slowly, getting looks from the surrounding shinobi. Uzumaki is like me. I consider him a friend. The sleep-deprived shinobi replied. Uzumaki nodded, I consider you a friend, as well as Gaara of the Sand. Soon enough a chunin appeared. The council is ready. Uzumaki took in a deep breath and, as he made his way in, the retrieval team went with him. "We're here to defend you." The others, learning experiments. Uzumaki sighed. "I really wanted to keep this private, but let's go." The room was darkened and Uzumaki was shown into a booth. "Is the accused present?" A voice called, it was distorted. Uzumaki stood in the booth and said nothing. "The accused is present. His defense." Uzumaki floundered, he had no time to get a representative, well none that would assist him. Nara Shikamaru represents the defendant. Shikamaru stood up. Uzumaki fought back a grin, this was going to suck. Denon, 012607, Uzumaki. You stand accused of using illegal power, resisting arrest, failing a mission, abandoning your comrades. How do you plead? He pleads not guilty. Shikamaru said, standing up. The lights came up and Shikamaru gulped. Facing them was none other than Midokado Himura, one of the elders of the Konoha Council. Uzumaki looked around, they were boned. Tsunade was present. She was sitting there, her fingers touching, watching with interest. She had been sidelined by the elders. Shikamaru looked at Uzumaki and nodded. My client claims not guilty to all charges. That caused words of dissension amongst the civilian council. That's exactly like someone who has something to hide would say. Why does he even need a trial? We all know it's guilty. Your Honor. Uzumaki said, standing up. Himura spoke up. You wish to change your conviction. Is this court-martial correct? There was a nod. The fact this is a court-martial gives me reason to say that. Why is the civilian council present? I have reason to believe they don't need to see this. Uzumaki said. Himura stopped. The prosecuted party raises a point. Tsunade clicked her fingers and the Anbu who escorted Uzumaki appeared. Get them out. The Anbu were amongst the civilians like Tora on catnip. If you were on our peril, I'd have you executed. Shouted the civilian who was head of the academy. If we were on your peril, I would have executed myself. One of the Anbu said. But that the trial resumed. After a thorough breakdown and proper accounting of the use against each member of the Sound Ninja 4 and later 5. After an eternity, Himura spoke again. The prosecution rested. Eventually the last excruciating detail was laid out when another voice spoke. I request that the Jinchuriki recounts what happened exactly at the Valley of the End. Tsunade groaned, she knew Danzo was here. The old warhawk was making an evident play for Uzumaki. Uzumaki sighed and he recounted the events for the 5th time. After he finished, Uzumaki spoke once more. I have proof. You do? Sneered Danzo and Uzumaki revealed the 2 fist-sized holes. Tsunade stood up and I, Senju Tsunade, decided. Uzumaki is innocent of all charges. Now everyone screams. The Shinobi Council stood up to leave, but Nara Shikaku, Akimichi Choza, Hyuga Hiyashi, and Inyazuka Tsume nodded to him as they left. Soon enough Uzumaki was released from the courtroom, he looked horrid. His pale complexion from being at death's door was that of gray and his messy hair fell limply in a mess. Waiting for him were Kakashi and Jiraiya, Kaka-sensei, Iro-sanin. Even the loving nickname felt forced. How did it go? Asked Kakashi. He had been recuperating in the hospital when he heard about the court-martial. Well, I'm not in prison. The civilian council hates me. I'm off home to rest, then I need to think. Uzumaki said. Jiraiya looked at his secret godson. I'll swing by with food and stuff. You and I need to have a chat. Uzumaki nodded at arigato. Soon enough the Konoha 11 began to meander off, leaving Tenten and Uzumaki heading towards the seedier part of Konoha. Do you live down here? Tenten said. Uzumaki nodded. It's a shipwreck, but this shipwreck is mine. That cripple gave out a term about me and I'd rather not talk about it. Due to the fact, for some reason you want to help me out, it's going to come up at some point. Why are you helping me? Not that I'm complaining. Tenten grinned at him. Because you're a good person, capable, reliable, and helped my teammate out of a moody slump. Mainly because I can and I want to. Why? You're acting like you've never had friends before. Uzumaki's thin but honest smile faded. You've hit the nail on the head, Tenten, more than you know. Don't worry, the people around here, they're decent enough. Slit your throat if you say the wrong thing, etc. But down here, where the Hokage rarely looks, we look out for each other. They helped a lot. Food, veg for a fee, not much, but people have to eat, and all that. Tenten nodded. This part of town felt like an area that needed D ranks and C ranks to keep it under control. Soon enough they were inside Uzumaki's flat. The flat was well kept, surprisingly. A little ragged, but serviceable. True enough, as the duo had made themselves relatively at home, there was a knock on the door. Uzumaki answered it and a cloaked woman appeared carrying a hamper and 3 bags. Tenten observed Uzumaki handing over money and receiving the bags and hamper, and the woman disappeared. Uzumaki created shadow clones which put the stuff away, and soon enough the duo were drinking peach juice from cartons. What's a? Uzumaki sighed. It means power of human sacrifice. A deep voice said. The teens looked up to find Jiraiya standing in the kitchen. "I see you got my messenger. Settle down kids, I'll provide the information." Soon enough Uzumaki and Tenten were in the relatively cramped kitchen space. Tenten had inadvertently placed her hand on Uzumaki's and the blonde was trying not to overreact. "Okay, you know of the Biju or specifically the Nine Tails." They both nodded. "There are 8 others, anyway at the end of the Warring States era, which we know, as the first Cage Summit was performed. The hidden villages were formed and the tailed beasts were distributed with Yuzushi Agakure no Sado, Hidden Eti village receiving the 9 tails. That extended to Konoha as well due to the Shadame Hokage marrying the Jinchuriki of the Biju at the time. Due to the power of the Kyuubi only in Uzumaki or those of Uzumaki blood can successfully and safely hold, restrain or even use its power. Tenten stared at the blonde. "Your career as a shinobi started from birth. October 10th, that's the only reason I can think of why you get so much hate from both shinobi and civilians." Uzumaki chuckled. "The hatred of the shinobi is the fact that I do pranks in the village." Tenten nodded and Jiraiya chuckled. "Jiraiya-sama, why are you here? Why are you so fixated on Uzumaki?" Jiraiya chuckled at his godson's friend. "I'm Konoha's only seal master since Yondaime and Uzumaki Kushina died. As for your name brat, I'm not too sure on your parents." Uzumaki nodded at that. "It's also my responsibility to check the status of the seal of the Jinchuriki." Tenten nodded and turned to Uzumaki. "Are you free tomorrow? I need to get checked out by Bachan, then I should be free. Want to help get access to the shinobi archives?" Tenten stared at him. "You don't have access. The bitch at the front doesn't like me. Something to do with me being a menace. So I pranked them. Used a paint bomb anyway, I'm tempted to strong-arm her into helping me. Kunai may or may not be used, and threats revolving around death may or may not be used either." Tenten grinned. "I'd love to. Then get a BBQ. Threats will be used for you to get service." Jiraiya was fuming. His chakra was flooding out of him to the extent that the room was shaking. "Kid, I'll do this. As your godfather this is my responsibility." He stopped when he saw Jenin's shocked expression. "We'll explain later. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to bring terror to the village." With that Jiraiya jumped out the window onto the rooftop and headed towards the center of the village. Tenten hugged Uzumaki and left. That afternoon, Uzumaki lay on his couch thinking. Soon enough he found himself falling asleep and the image of Tenten in his dreams. Jiraiya, the sane cat amongst the pigeons, can't do it justice. Men, women, shinobi, and civilians alike scattered to the sides of the streets and up the walls. Jiraiya in the space of the afternoon had in a state of godfatherly rage and justice, he had the librarian at the toad point and working quickly got Uzumaki registered in the library and then proceeded to knock on the doors of the civilian council. No one slept easy that night, everyone remembered why no one angered Jiraiya. It was midnight when the librarian was woken in the middle of the night alongside her husband. She tried to scream but found a powerful hand around her throat and several blades pointed at her and her husband. "There are 2 Anbu, one in your sons and the other in daughters. They are ready to pull them from their beds, bring them in here and we'll slit their throats in front of you. Unless you do everything I say, when I say, and exactly how I say," growled their assailant. They nodded. The children were brought in, the Anbu remained hidden, but their assailant revealed himself to be Jiraiya. "Lord Jiraiya. What brings you here?" stammered the librarian. She had no idea what she had done to incur his wrath. Uzumaki, I've heard that you've been hindering a shinobi's progress." Jiraiya growled. "Yeah. We have. We all have. You think I'm the only one? We had orders from the council to hinder his progress and give Uchiha-sama all the help he required." Jiraiya nodded. "I'm just here for clarification. Here's what you're going to do." He put some papers in front of her. "Sign these. That's all I need to do?" "Sure." In her frantic haste, she didn't realize that she, like the many others who had hindered his godson, had begun to make things correct. Orochimaru was known to be the most merciless and sociopathic of the Sannin. That wasn't to say that Tsunade and Jiraiya weren't as merciless, on the contrary, they didn't get the title legendary Sannin for being caring. When they fought Sanshao no Hanzo or Hanzo of the Salamander, they had proceeded to flatten the lower areas of Omegakure no Sado, they had pushed Hanzo back towards the village, and then Hanzo had stopped playing with them and quickly broke Orochimaru's arm and 2 fingers in the midst of a tiger seal. Dislocated Tsunade's leg and sliced Jiraiya with his poisoned Kusurigama, which had the same poison that Hanzo had flowing through his bloodstream. He had survived, but it was mainly due to the toads. Tsunade had managed to save Orochimaru's career, but the 2 fingers would be forever tender, so he turned his skill to and minimized the seals he required for his considerable ninjutsu. The papers had been signed, Jiraiya nodded, and the librarian and her husband's lives ended, blood seeping into the blankets. "Put the girl back in her bed. Put the boy on the loo. Quietly now." They left the house, leaving no trace of their arrival or departure. Not even a single leaf. "Where to next, Lord Jiraiya?" Jiraiya looked up. That's all for tonight. We've got a busy week. Rest up, we've got more people to get. We still have to scour the slums as well. The Anbu winced, the slums that were a no-go. The Konoha populace treated the slums as a symbiotic relationship with the main Konoha. They were technically Konoha citizens, but well, the laws they maintained were weird. I'll get brute squads. Who, where, when, and how are we hitting the slums? Brute squads were 2 squads of Anbu that were codenamed Ox, Bull, Rhino, Grizzly, Elephant, Gorilla, Anaconda, and Tiger. The 8 of them were amongst the strongest Doten users and, as well as some of the most physically capable outside of Might Guy. Everyone, all of the slums, tomorrow, and full throttle. We're not going to stop until all the cells are full, and I know exactly who hindered and who helped my godson. Jiraiya sighed. The Anbu left to prepare themselves for the inevitable pain in the ass process that was getting the citizens of the slums to talk. The slums, as mentioned previously, were the rundown, derelict, and unpleasant areas of Konoha. It was home to the poor, the destitute, murderers, rapists, and shinobi who had been dismissed or quit for whatever reasons. The cages had tried to stamp out the slum, but after 15 failed attempts by the Nidaime Hokage, a tentative truce came about. That truce was the main way that Konoha had survived the Second Shinobi War, the Third Shinobi War, and several occupations by opposing nations. The slums possessed a wide means of ferrying resources, information, and whatnot throughout the village. The other thing that Jiraiya learned was that the slums governed themselves, so if people made it to the slums, got sanctuary, but were found to be convicted of homicide against children, or anything about the children, they were never seen again. It was well known that even in Kiri, everyone abided by the rule of unless children are directly mentioned in the contract, they are left alone. Jiraiya looked up. Dawn was breaking. He needed to speak with his godson, he needed to know the extent of the slums' involvement in his life. But that he headed towards his apartment. The slums could wait. Uzumaki popped his neck and rummaged around in his fridge before fixing himself some breakfast. Today, he was going to be training with Tenten. He ate his breakfast, grabbed his kunai and shuriken, and vanished out of his apartment. He walked down 1 flight of stairs and knocked on his landlord's door. As usual, there was no response. Uzumaki this time hopped onto the balcony, onto a roof. He landed neatly, but when he stood the roof creaked, then with surprising skill. One that made Falcon, his current observer's eyes widen. Uzumaki landed smoothly on the wall. He maneuvered around and found the spare room. He fished out a kunai and with some skill slid the window open and he slid inside. The inside was dusty, but it was the spare room. Applying chakra, Uzumaki maneuvered around the wall, leaving no imprint. He opened the door, it opened silently except for brushing along the carpet. Dust jumped up, there were dust balls everywhere. This place hadn't been used in years. Uzumaki moved around and then he saw the front door. It is up to his knees in envelopes. He took one look at the envelopes and saw his name on them. He fished out a kunai and opened one of the early now yellowing envelopes. It popped open revealing money. Uzumaki gulped, his throat dry, and his eyes welled up with tears. He was told to keep the noise down, but the apartment below him looked like it had been abandoned for ages. His knees went weak and he collapsed on the floor curled up. That was how Tenten found him. Tenten, 5 minutes previously. Tenten got dressed in her blue ninja pants, sandals, and her normal pink sleeveless kipau blouse. Over the hours she had spent with Uzumaki before Jiraiya had joined them. She felt that she had gotten to know her colleague and fellow orphan better. When she saw the flat, she realized that it was either deserted aside from Uzumaki or near enough. When he hadn't arrived, she grabbed her stuff and headed towards the slums. Uzumaki's block of apartments were on the very outskirts of the slums. She climbed the stairs and, as she passed the landlord's room, she heard the very distinct sound of someone crying. "Are you okay? Open up." The bolt slid back and Tenten's eyes widened, standing there looking disheveled red-eyed and utterly horrible was Uzumaki. Real time, Uzumaki quickly found himself in a hug. She pushed him back into the room and shut the door behind them. "What is this place? What's with the mail? Are you even allowed to open this? Abandoned, should have been my landlord's, who I paid rent to every month. However, I suspect no one has lived here since I was put up in this place since I was 6. The mail is my rent money sent to a non-existent landlord." Tenten's eyes widened. "That's utter bullshit. Who would do that? Who owns the building? Who paid for your rent?" Uzumaki shrugged. Civilian council to the second question. Civilian council probably, and Jiji, the Sandaime did. Supposedly that money didn't go through, so I had to pay. Since I was nearly broke, I had to scrounge up whatever coin I had to tap into the slum network. They gave me the money back. Apparently they don't charge kids, orphans or dot. I only really started paying after I got my first missions. The Hokage organized it so that I got paid fully in cash, since I can't exactly open up a bank account. Tenten hugged him. All this is the money that you paid an empty landlord. I understand that people had no love for the Kyuubi attack, but to take it out on you. Uzumaki nodded and the pair turned back to the pile of envelopes and soon enough his wallet, Gama-chan, was bursting at the seams. Uzumaki stood up and he looked at his clothing. I need some new clothes. Tenten grinned and hugged him again. That's the spirit. And this time let's check the Shinobi bank. You may have an account there. All Shinobi do the moment they pass the Genin test, the one set by the sensei. Uzumaki nodded and they left the flat. As they did so, Falcon called in Uzumaki and a friend left the slum. Let's do this. Underneath a personalized hiding, Jiraiya nodded. All units, move in. Uzumaki and Tenten made their way up to the bank. Behind the information desk was Yamanaka. Looking around, all of the bank tellers were garbed in Shinobi gear with their headbands on display. Ah, how can I help you, Higurashi-san? It's not for me, Yamanaka-san, but rather, began Tenten. Uzumaki. Shinobi registration number 012607. Yes, you have several accounts here. 4 you're not allowed access to until you're either a jonin or turn 21. You have a young person's account which has been seeing lots of deposits from your Shinobi career. Ah, I see. I know about your problem with the civilian council and I know your deal with the Sandame. He has been giving you 2 D ranks and 3% in cash whilst putting the rest into an account. You would have found out about this when you became Chunin. Uzumaki nodded. Thank you. You will get everything in time. You're still living in the apartment block in the slums. Uzumaki nodded. The discussion wrapped up and Uzumaki walked away with several flyers and Shinobi recommended apartments and properties. All of them away from the slums. Tenten subconsciously grabbed Uzumaki's hand as they left the bank. Did you see? She hurt off to one side. The demon-loving slut. Someone needs to let her know what she's getting herself into. Uzumaki stopped, as did Tenten. Uzumaki applied chakra and a trace amount of yakai and he zoned in on the insulters. Found them. Uzumaki, don't be stupid. Tenten said, applying chakra to her and Uzumaki's hand. Uzumaki stopped and stared at her. You sure? Tenten nodded. It'll say more about you if you don't fill it. The civilians. Believe me, the Shinobi acknowledge you as a comrade. You can fight back against the civilians, but don't do it so openly. Uzumaki growled but stopped himself. He knew that it would be stupid. He heard the screams last night. He knew something was going on, so he nodded and Tenten led him to a little store with a placard outside saying Higurashi's, the best you'll ever get. Tenten practically pushed Uzumaki through the door. Uzumaki's jaw dropped. There were weapons and tools everywhere. He saw racks of kunai, stacks of shuriken, all with different grips, lengths, sharpness, and weight. He saw rack upon rack of tanto, wakizashi, katana, kanabo, tetsubo, mace, shuriken launcher, and other things. Off to the back appeared to be wearing clothing. I'm on this way. Soon enough Uzumaki found himself looking at rack upon rack of various clothing. Nothing orange or hideously bright in store, I'm afraid, but we do have these. Said Tenten as she held out in essence a pitch black version of his orange tracksuit. There were also the standard base uniform of all Chunin and Jonin, wire fishnets, and back-plated armored gloves, fingerless gloves, and full-on elbow-length armored gloves. I'll get 4 sets of the base layer with a skin wire net protection, the full-length armored gloves, and the fingerless ones, both sets of gloves twice, along with Konoha issue traveling cloaks for summer and winter, and Konoha Kamo kit. Also, I need more shuriken, kunai, and quite possibly a sword. Tenten grinned. Let's do the clothing, kunai, and shuriken. The sword can wait. Uzumaki left 6,000 ryo lighter, but with much better and serviceable equipment. He turned towards the training grounds. Meanwhile, Jiraiya's rattle on Konoha continued. The slums were caught off guard. Generally they received information from Chunin and Jonin who chose to drink near the slums. They even had a few plants in the Shinobi force. Alas, none in the Anbu, so they were caught off guard as Jiraiya and the 24-man heavy-duty squads of the Anbu came crashing down on them. The fighting was fierce, terrible, and ridiculously lopsided. Practically all of the confrontations the Anbu won, but not before gaining ingenious respect for the citizens of their city. We're looking for the guys in charge. You mean the Kage-sama? Surprised. We use the same titles as you guys. They won't be happy with this. Why are you here anyway? Jiraiya's eyes hardened. Yuzu, the Jinchuriki kid. We're not stupid, Jiraiya-sama. We know who he is. He's a good kid, sure, a little loud, and with cheese in his ears rather than brains. We help him, he helps us. Mutual exchange and all that. Jiraiya made a gesture and the Anbu dropped their prisoners. Take us to the cage. What's in? Adim is ordering a purge on anyone who hindered him. Oh, Tenten and Uzumaki. Tenten was enjoying Uzumaki not so much. They had started with Taijutsu and Tenten had taken it upon herself to correct his abysmal Taijutsu technique. That was when Tenten realized. Uzumaki was a true chakra monster, his reserves were through the roof. He was also the perfect partner. Unlike Lee and Niji, who were nearly Takebetsu Jonin in speed, allowing them to cover the ground easily. She was Takebetsu. She couldn't beat her teammates, but she could make them take her seriously. However, Uzumaki, the biggest chakra tank that she knew of, was perfect. He could spawn hundreds and thousands of clones, and still enough for those clones to spawn clones of themselves, coupled with his skill in the replacement jutsu. It was a proper challenge. As they trained, taught, and mentored one another, Uzumaki possessed a ridiculously powerful body-based learning rather than mental learning. What this meant for Tenten was that her skills of teaching or pulling his skills up to a decent enough level was easier. She hid his clones, they dispelled, and eventually the pair found the secret to the cage bunchen. Seal, Kyuubi watched with interest. Interesting method, Warden. Slow improvement, maybe you won't be a disappointing avatar. Kyuubi watched as his avatar trained with the bun-haired girl. She's acceptable. He rumbled to himself. She possessed exceptionally dense and strong reserves of chakra. He thought back to the pot, golden rope, gourd, fan, sword, and staff that his father wielded back before he had accumulated the mass he had now. He shuddered slightly, as the amber pot was the only inanimate object big enough and spacious enough to contain himself and Jayuki together. Sage above Jayuki, and he had done more than enough when younger to warrant being trapped in there. As for the gourd, it could safely contain up to any 4 of his younger siblings at one time. Kyuubi shook his head. Those were good times before these pathetic ninja decided to weaponize him and his siblings. Kyuubi snapped his thoughts back to the here and now. The bun-haired girl, she would make a decent wielder of the fan of 5 elements. Of course he would have to modify it so it didn't kill her straight away, and his avatar would have to retrieve it first. The Kyuubi pulsed an ever so small amount of yokai out. The deal worked in 2 ways. The avatar could pull up to 3 tails of his own accord, but he himself, the moment the boy manipulated the yokai, could push more out. Hypothetically, he could push 9 tails of chakra out, but as the thoughts came to his mind, the seal began to pulse ominously. Outside, Uzumaki just managed to grab Tenten's wrist, twist her arm, and with a firm grasp on her pants, and top flip her. Thankfully it was onto the ground, but the actual flip would have been to break the back of the one grappled. However, Tenten wasn't trained by arguably the strongest Jujutsu practitioner in Konoha. As Uzumaki flipped her, she spun, and the hold fell away. She brought her foot down in an axe kick that should have broken Uzumaki's arm, but, as she made eye contact, she swore she saw his eyes turn slitted and faintly red. The kick came into contact with thin air. Tenten's eyes widened as Uzumaki's speed literally increased. That was on top of his already high Jonin stamina and high Chunin speed. Uzumaki gasped. The yokai in his system was amazing. Uzumaki honestly felt more alive than ever before. Are you ready, Tenten? Tenten nodded. Bring it on. Uzumaki blurred, he could be going faster. His body was screaming at him to go faster, but for now he was resisting. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Uzumaki multiplied into 100. Tenten grabbed her bow staff. If he gets his hands on me, I'm finished. Then he'll turn this into an attrition battle which I'll surely lose. Oh well, let's do this. The Uzumaki swarm rushed her. Tenten twirled the bow staff around, she brought it down hard 4 times and dispelled 4 Uzumaki clones in an instant. The spar began to intensify as Uzumaki began to use more unique and dangerous methods to try and get into Tenten's guard. Alright. That's an astonishing display of youth. Break it up. Like that, Uzumaki's kick towards Tenten's face was avoided, and the next thing Uzumaki knew was that he was flat on his face. Uzumaki came round to see an older-looking Lee standing with Tenten, Niji, and surprisingly Lee himself. Who? I am the sublime green beast of prey. The Leaf's noble gentleman. The Leaf's most physical Jonin. I am Might Guy. Jonin of Team 10. Declared the newly named Might Guy. Uzumaki nodded. Guy sensei, I'm Uzumaki, Genin Team 7 under my youthful rival, Kakashi, and other things. Guy finished softly. Tenten knows the full thing, rather keep it that way. Guy nodded. What brought you to this training ground? Uzumaki nodded to Tenten. Tenten has been helping me out. Helping me with Taijutsu. I nodded. I am willing to help. Just then another presence appeared. The 5 shinobi spun, and it was Jiraiya. Aki, everything's been sorted. It was then that the shinobi noticed faint traces of blood. Everything alright, Jiraiya-sanin? Uzumaki asked. He decided to keep things polite. Tenten's opinion of Uzumaki increased. Never worry, speaking of which, due to what happened with Team 7 at peak Team 10 Uzumaki, what happened? You've kinda been quiet about all of it. Tenten asked. Well, one member shoved his hand through my chest twice and snapped my neck. Currently Orochimaru's rent boy. The other said rent boy fangirl who will more than likely try and kill me for not bringing rent boy back, but she'll fail and most likely be dead. So my sensei, noticing the proper lack of coherent teamwork, Willer is liable to dissolve the team, sending us fuck knows where, but I'm probably in reserves, jailer with some cunt of a Jonin sensei, or hates me for who I am, and S-rank secrets. Team 10 nodded. You mean like the term Jinchuriki? Niji stated. Uzumaki nodded. Niji was about to continue when he looked at Jiraiya, the Sannin nodded. I looked it up. Means power of human sacrifice. What that means I don't know, but, and quite frankly I don't want to know. Uzumaki grinned. Simply, their weapons. Their service to the village begins at birth. They're hated because quite frankly a lot of blood needs to be spilled. Niji's eyes widened. I won't say more. He then bowed deeply. I am sorry for my words in the Chunin exams. Uzumaki nodded. No apology needed. Anyway, why are you here? You owe me an explanation. Jiraiya sighed. Anyway, with the dissolution of Team 7, Tsuneda's ordered me to take on an apprentice also. Whilst I'm here, Guy, as a member of the Sannin, I am requesting a demonstration of your team's fighting capabilities, and it is up to my discretion if any further training is required. I gulped slightly. He had a feeling this wouldn't go too well for them. He looked at Tenten. Was he really a bad sensei? He didn't want to lose his students yet. Is there another way? Jiraiya looked at him with a harsh eye. Anything you want to say? I haven't managed to find a suitable ninjutsu practitioner to help Tenten. She's been looking to enhance her dot. Jiraiya nodded and turned to Uzumaki. I need to test this team of genin. Uzumaki winced, and it was blatantly evident that Jiraiya was holding back. But the three genin, they were impressive. It was evident that they worked well as a team. However, everything went slightly pear-shaped when Tenten pulled out her scrolls, and, as she went to launch her twin rising dragons, Jiraiya halted the duel, and with ease and precision of a seal master, he disabled the attack, and the scrolls fell open. Tenten and Uzumaki were in shock and awe of it, and Jiraiya in raw fury. The four genin were pinned by the raw amount of chakra being emitted. Guy was also affected, but to a far lesser degree. Genin Higurashi. Tenten snapped to the attention of Jiraiya-sama. Who taught you Fuinjutsu? Tenten rattled off 3 teachers, with the last one being Yamino Ruka. Jiraiya nodded. Anyone else? Dusan. Jiraiya's eyes widened. He remembered Higurashi Hiro. Good student, unfortunately overshadowed by Namikaze Minato and Hyuga Hiashi. Out of the 3 of them he was closest to Hiro and Minato. In Minato, Jiraiya saw himself, and in Hiro, Jiraiya saw what he wanted but couldn't have. Minato was the laid-back spirit needing something to focus him on, and Hiro already had it. So when it came for Jiraiya to choose an apprentice, he chose Minato. He had seen how Hiro had become smitten over one of the core kunoichi. Jiraiya grinned to himself. He was grateful that his students had managed to have families. Hiro-chan was never the best at Fuinjutsu. You should have just learned from your father. Tenten looked at the Sannin with awe. You know Tusan. He was one of my genin anyway. I recommend you not use this formulae. The fact you've managed to not kill yourself or your team is incredible. Jiraiya turned back to Team Guy. You've trained them well, Guy. Very well, but why don't they have any aside from the 3? I gulped. Rock Lee possesses no capabilities in Gen or ninjutsu, so I have been building on his taijutsu and giving him the basics in. As for Hyuga Niji, Jiraiya sighed. I'll deal with the elders. He turned to Tenten Higurashi. Tenten. I am willing to give you tuition in Fuinjutsu for helping me get Uzumaki up to an acceptable level before I train him. Tenten nodded. I can do that. Genin Uzumaki. Uzumaki snapped to get Higurashi's reserves up. I want her to be able to create 5 kage bunshin. Guy, bring your other 2 genin. They are being sent into rotation. Jiraiya turned back. He smiled a secretive smile. His godson couldn't go wrong with the Higurashi in his corner. I was taken away by Jiraiya. Lee and Niji had been sent to the Hokage's office, where one of Nara Shikaku's aide-de-camps would take them to the Shinobi Lounge headquarters. The building was an impressive red brick building looking roughly 2 stories high, with sections of white brick displaying the symbol of fire and the sigil of Konoha. Anyone who had their forehead protector on display was immediately admitted through the threshold protector. It was also the area where all shinobi of all ranks socialized. Here there were no ranks separating the genin from the jonin. Here they were 3 things. Comrades, colleagues, and warriors in arms for the betterment of Konohagakure no Sado, her territories and interests. Rotation. I'm Katetsu, this is Izumo. Katetsu said as he saw Niji and Lee walk into the lounge. Correct. I'm Hyuga Niji, and this is Rock Lee. Niji said blandly. Aren't you the one Uzumaki beat in the Chunin exams? Someone blurted out. I am Y. Niji replied, eyes narrowing. I heard the Chunin continued. Uzumaki bested me and helped me change my habits. I consider him a good friend. Niji replied, activating his and fixed a man with a look. Rock Lee, Hyuga Niji. I'm Jekko Hanzo, a relative of Proctor. Get your kit and meet me at the front gate. You've got 3 months in the land of smoke with Team 36 on border duty. Hanzo was a pale, sickly shinobi and resembled Heiei-sensei in that he could easily have been a brother. The only difference between them was the lack of a physical cough. Niji and Lee nodded and the pair vanished. Training ground 14. Alright, Tenten now follows the hand seals again. Uzumaki instructed as he ran Tenten through the sequence of hand seals that allowed him to utilize his best dot. Tenten nodded. Currently she was doing a chakra exercise that she had seen Uzumaki perform, which was running up and down a tree and then doing an array of sit-ups and pull-ups whilst attached to the tree by the back of her knees. Tenten completed a rep before backflipping onto the ground. She formed the clone seal cage bunshin no jutsu. The pulse of chakra was heralded by 2 plumes of chakra and 2 identical pink and blue-clad Tentens appeared, one on either side of the Kenweichi in question. Tenten swayed slightly as the chakra exhaustion hit her. She readied herself, but Uzumaki was at her side as fast as anything. Dispel the clones, you need a break. Tenten fumbled with a kunai, so Uzumaki idly dispatched them. That hurt Uzumaki. She managed to say as she felt the fatigue and the impact of the kunai. Uzumaki, did you know I felt the kunai when they were driven into my skull and chest? Tenten said as the pair were sitting with their backs to the training posts. Uzumaki cocked his head. I didn't. Now that makes sense. Whatever happens to a cage bunshin must be relayed back to you. Damn, Sasuke's Kaiten jutsu are deadly. Yeah, Kaiten tends to be. Tenten replied with a dry grin. Tenten knew that being a shinobi took its toll, her team helped with it, but not by much. Lee was too expressive and Niji was too conservative. They were good people, but Uzumaki, she didn't know why, but the loud orange blonde felt much more equal to her. He knew what had to be done, but he did seem a little solid between the ears, as her father would normally say. You have the reserves to create 2 cage bunshin. Although good, it needs to be better. Uzumaki said. Tenten cocked her head. What do you mean? I can create several clones and they can use the ones that I know. You only just created 2 clones. Although one might be able to use yours, the more the better. Uzumaki explained. Tenten chuckled, sorry for not being a chakra monster like yourself or having the reserves of people from a clan. Uzumaki shook his head. Jiraiya-sensei told me to get your reserves to create 5 cage bunshin food. Then go again. Tenten nodded. Yakiniku Q. Uzumaki nodded tentatively. If they let me in. Why is that? Uzumaki sighed. It's to do with my birthday and things associated with October 10th. I understand the Kyuubi attack. No, you don't, Tenten. Rumbled Jiraiya as he appeared on the training ground. Tenten looked up at Jiraiya-sama. I'll stay. You need to learn this. By the powers given to me by Sandaime-sensei and reaffirmed by Tsunade-hime, Godame-sama, I have every right to meddle in the shinobi forces as I see fit. Yondaime asked me to fulfill a duty to him, so that's what I'm doing. Higurashi Tenten, Uzumaki. For now under Jiraiya we are officially Team 66. Tenten gulped. Why am I part of the team? Jiraiya grinned. Because I taught your father and I'm his godson. The reason I've not been around is because his parents have got a list of enemies as long as he is tall. Furthermore, I have my own enemies on top of that. Some of them are rather intelligent, more intelligent than I'd like. One of such enemies killed my teacher. Plus I run the spy network, so looking after a baby is not the best idea. Before you complain about Uzumaki, I have personally ended more than 50 plots involving snatching you from Konoha. My information has ended and helped to end 4, maybe even 5 times that. Uzumaki nodded. Were my parents that important? Were they that strong? Jiraiya nodded. 2 of the strongest I've ever seen anyway. Uzumaki, what happens if we encounter Uchiha Sasuke on a mission? Uzumaki looked at the sand and take him out. Damn the council. Tenten's eyes widened. Uzumaki, seriously? It's been nearly 8 years since the massacre. We've not been overrun, and last time I checked our uniform is green and black, not red and tan. Uzumaki replied, getting a grim chuckle from Jiraiya. So to celebrate the formation of Team Jiraiya, let's go to Yakiniku Q. Then tomorrow your training begins. Will I be let in? Jiraiya nodded. I know the one who owns it. He's an Akamichi, one on my peril. He was one of the people who ensured you got good food every week through the slum network. Uzumaki nodded whilst Tenten looked on curiously. What is the slum network? Uzumaki grinned weakly. That's a complicated question, but it helped me survive my pretty shit childhood. Jiraiya snorted. I'll explain. Like Uzumaki, the slum network kept me alive. When Shadaime-sama created Konohagakure no Sado, the climate was known to be unpredictable and it ruined the village, causing it to sink. So the first Hokage repeated the process, and this time his wife and brother linked the ruined former Konoha to this Konoha through a set of dot. The influence of these in essence created an under Konoha. The people who live there are the scum of the world, petty renta thugs, gangs both organized and unorganized, and shinobi who have been discharged dishonorably or served so long they can't do anything but serve Konoha. They're the reason why Konoha has managed to beat all other nations who have taken up arms against us. The Hokage knows they exist and would love to purge them, but she knows that they provide a vital surface. So there must be some sort of truce with them, right? Tenten said slowly. They pay their taxes, don't make too much noise, so that the Anbu or Jonin squads come down on them like a ton of bricks. Furthermore, they alert us about upstart individuals and gangs who are making too much noise. The bandit missions. Jiraiya nodded, those missions are a polite way of pruning time. They're mainly used for you guys to kill a human you guys have killed, right? As in killing blow or indirectly killing. Because I don't think I've actually killed anyone. Uzumaki replied, Aoi, whatever, the Nukenin who stole the sword of the Thunder God, I broke the sword which caused him to fall to his death. I have. Bandit mission. I got separated from Niji, and well I needed to think fast, and Jiraiya nodded. I'll get us a C rank and a third member. Tenten's in charge when I'm not here, speaking of which Cage Bunshin counts. Using our bodies. Both. 1 utilizing that is useful in combat and 2 with potential to use Academy 3. Tenten's shame was apparent in her voice. Jiraiya nodded, good progress for a day's work. More to be done by wonderful apprentices. With that the 3 headed to Yakiniku-Q. Are you sure about Uzumaki? About Sasuke? Tenten asked, killing teammates is not an easy thing to do. Uzumaki looked at her, and I got stabbed. Stabbed in the heart with a lightning-covered hand, and the one who delivered it was cackling like a madman, so yes Tenten, I am 100% certain that I'm going to do this. As they reached Yakiniku-Q, Jiraiya had been pulled to one side, and Uzumaki saw a black-clad Anbu with red stains across the breastplate, scrolls were exchanged, and the Anbu vanished. The 3 entered the restaurant and were met by an Akimichi. Everyone stopped as Uzumaki walked in. I will not have any problems in my establishment, Akimichi rumbled as he showed the trio to a table near the back. The food was exceptional, and the service perhaps even more so. Jiraiya grinned. Don't worry, Akimichi Dosu is a very good man. He owns, runs, and is head chef here. He knows Uzumaki, and since he owns the place there is nothing the civilians can do to stop you from getting service, remember that. Article 6 subsection 8 paragraph 4 means you can force the civilians to give you equal service. Uzumaki grinned as he sipped his tea. He had heard enough from the restaurant to work out proper manners. It helped that Jiraiya was subtly tapping, nudging, and occasionally stamping on Uzumaki to correct him. Eventually the trip left and went their separate ways. We have a mission in the morning. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.